Hi, welcome to Foundational Film Lighting, a course for those starting out in video and film production or anyone wanting to better understand the basics of how lighting functions in photography. I'm Scott Rucci with Rucci Productions in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been a director DP for many types of productions over the last 30 years and have a broad range of lighting experience. This course is not highly technical, but focuses on core principles and the application of those principles. It is not intended to give formulas for lighting specific scenes, but rather to give a general understanding of principles that can be adapted to any lighting situation. We hope this provides a solid foundation for you to begin to build a thorough and skillful master of lighting, or at least to better understand it in order to collaborate with lighting specialists. The course is presented in short segments, generally around 3 to 6 minutes each, which can be viewed individually or serially. Initially, we'll be dropping videos every few days until everything is posted. We expect a total of around 50 to 60 segments. In addition to the main videos, there will be a number of addendum videos on related topics and an FAQ section with answers to questions students have asked. All of the PowerPoint slides and demo videos are available at rucciproductions.com for download or review at any time. We welcome your feedback and hope to grow this effort into an ever-improving body of shared knowledge about the art and science of film lighting. Thank you for watching. Welcome to Foundational Film Lighting. In this first video, we'll outline the structure of our course and the fundamental attributes of lighting.
Before we jump into class, a word about the structure of the course. The course is divided into 7 major sections, which if you watched a section uncut, it would run about 30 minutes. The first major section is an overview of the key attributes of light that we're going to review. Intensity or power, color or frequency, direction, reflectivity, and broadness or diffusion, the spread of the light. The next 4 sections focus on each of these in detail. Now, the final 2 sections cover instrumentation and lighting controls and application of techniques in a scene, plus next steps for learning more and moving into a professional working environment. Now, for online release, each major section will be divided up into smaller parts, about 5 to 8 parts per section, and those parts are 3 to 9 minutes long each. After all of the parts are published for a given major section, we'll also publish the entire section as one long video, in case you'd like to watch it that way. Now, we're going to kick off with kind of a teaser preview and a little challenge. We're going to show you something that we shot during the final section and ask some questions that you ought to be asking when you're approaching a lighting situation. These questions address the topics that we're going to explore throughout the course. Now, near the end of the course, we're going to revisit this list of questions and give you the answers. By then, we hope you'll have a deeper understanding of what's behind each of these questions and why we want to have this kind of a mindset that will put you in a position to begin to master the art of film lighting. So let's jump in.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you. So this, I'm going to show you a scene. Now, we did this for the very last class that we'll be getting to, one of the last classes we'll be getting to. We lit this as kind of our final scene where we put all of our techniques together into one scene and tried to show as many techniques as we could. And the aim here is to identify the lighting elements in the image. You know, what's going on here? Are there more than one light source? Is the light reflecting off objects in the background? If I wanted to recreate this scene, how would I do it? So the objectives of this course are to help you observe the lighting around you and in media and artwork, to analyze what that light is doing and how the light sources are functioning, and to be able to apply that knowledge to your own work. So let's look at our clip. I want to talk about, analyzing lighting and thinking about observing what you see. So, I want to look at this and say, what are the attributes of the light going on here? So I'll go ahead and play this. This is a shot coming off the camera. This is the way it comes off the camera. And then we did some color grading later. This is just one of the shots we shot. But as you can see, there's a number of different light sources. And then I captured a couple of frames here. How many light sources are there? And you might have to look at more than one of these frames. What direction are those lights coming from? Where are they placed? What are the relative intensities of the lights and the resulting contrast? How much brighter is that one than that one? And how much of a contrast ratio does that create? How even and flat, or how much dramatic bright and dark do you have in the scene? What color are the lights? Are they all the same color? Do they vary? Is there a color contrast? Are there cool and warm, for instance? And does that create a mood? Does that affect the feeling of the scene? Are there objects with different reflectivity in the scene? And how does that work? How are these objects reflecting light? How is that affecting the exposure? How are brighter or darker objects exposing darker or lighter in the final exposure? And how does that affect the contrast in the scene? Darker objects and lighter objects creating overall contrast. Are there hard and soft light sources going on here? How do you tell? How is that working toward the overall mood and effect of the scene? What are we using to control the light or to shape it? What are we using to modify, what's shadow, what's lit? How do the motion in the elements when the video is rolling, the different things that are moving, how does that, create an effect for the scene? What's the overall mood? How's this scene feel? This video and these still photos with all these questions are available in the materials that you have. Now, by way of organizing the information in this course, we're going to go through some basic qualities of light. Those being power or intensity, color or frequency, direction, reflectivity of the objects that the light's hitting, and the broadness or diffusion or spread of the light source. These are the characteristics that shape the light you're seeing.
So that's a quick outline of the course. We'll be using a lot of terminology throughout the course. So if you want to brush up on these terms, you can check out the website, rucciproductions.com, for a glossary of terms. There's also a very slick video by Studio Binder full of Hollywood movies that's very entertaining to watch, and it runs through many of these terms kind of rapid fire with visual examples. There's also a syllabus of our entire course so you can see what's coming and where we are so far, plus slides with some of the charts and supporting material presented in the class, which you can refer to or download and keep for future reference. Glad you joined us and hope you find this course to be a strong building block for your future work. First attribute of lighting, volume or intensity of lighting, how bright it is. I'm going to go into each of these subjects in great detail in subsequent classes, trying to get just an overview today, but one of the points I want to get across today is that there's an immense range of brightness of light sources in the world. You go from candlelight at 12 lumens to a bright street light at 40,000 lumens, there's just this enormous range. And the thing is, the human eye and the human brain just automatically adjust to things. We don't notice changes in brightness and color so much. The camera's not that smart. If you're going to control the camera manually and understand what's going on, you have to understand the vast differences between shooting in a dark room and shooting outside on a sunny day. The kind of lights you need, they're radically different. The kind of f-stops you might need or the kind of filters you might need on your camera might be radically different because the light levels are radically different. And even outside, between a starry night at 0.02 lux and a bright sunny day at 120,000 lux, it's just a huge difference. With lights, a ring light like that over there, it might have 2,500 lumens, and a Musco light, which is like a football stadium light on an arm on the top of a truck, has 5 million lumens. So there's just this huge difference. So a practical application of that concept is, I've got to go light something, what do I use? I've got to go buy something or rent something or borrow something, and I've been in situations where I'll grab something that somebody said they had, and it's wholly inadequate because the area they're trying to light or the existing light that they're trying to compete with is just too bright or too big, and the light just doesn't have the output they need. So I could go shopping, for instance, and here are two lights. They're both the same size. They're both a foot by a foot. And there's quite a price difference. And, actually there are a lot of features that they each have, and that somewhat justifies the price difference. But also, when you look at the specs, one of them is 6 times brighter than the other. So that is a factor you need to pay attention to. So I wanted to do a demo. Let's step outside. Come on, just step outside, and if you can just position so you can see the monitor in here. So we have our mannequin out here, and she's a little bit in the shade, and we have a nice sunny background, really pretty background. It's kind of a nice light on her, right? So if I open up the iris and you get a nice exposure on her, that looks pretty good on her face, right? Now, while you might like that, you do see shots like that sometimes, but maybe you don't like the background looking so bright. I mean, it's really, really bright, right? Well, what can you do there? You can stop the iris down. That would be one option. So you just really iris down and you get down low like this, and now you've got a really nice blue sky and a really pretty background. That background looks really nice. Well, the only problem is now our subject looks like she's in the witness protection program. So maybe we can add a light, right? So let's take our smaller light, or the same size light that we have, but the one with the fewer lumens. So we'll just go ahead and put it in here. And there it is. On, off, on, off. So in this lighting situation, maybe that's not that helpful of a light. We could bring it in closer, but we really got to get it impractically close, right? Now, the bigger light, let's try that. Well, that's better, right? It does something. And if I bring it in kind of close, okay, on a close shot, you could use that. So if it was a close shot, yeah, that could work. This could be a light that you could use outside. But really, maybe you need something even bigger than this. Or maybe you need a reflector, or just a bigger light, or more than one light. Because the sun is really, really bright. Just trying to illustrate the vast differences in intensities of different lights and different light sources, and how you've got to match what you're doing with what you're competing against. So let's go back inside. And what happens a lot of times, it's not so much there's like a certain amount of light you need, it's that you go into a room and there's a window in the background, and if you boarded up the window, you could use any light you wanted. But if you don't board up the window, then it's like that. Then it's like we had outside. You get a choice between blown out window or dark person. And then what do? And so it's understanding, bottom line, that there's a big difference in brightness. And so you've got to think about what level of lights, do different things.
Second, color or frequency. There's a sort of default photographic scale that goes from typically 3200 degrees Kelvin. I'm not going to get into that right now, to 5600 degrees Kelvin. That's what photographers 3200 would call incandescent, and 5600 daylight. And daylight's on the bluer end, and 3200's on the yellower end of the scale. That's one of those things where your eye just adjusts. You don't even know it's happening. It's hard to perceive that there's a difference in color, but the camera doesn't know that. So with the camera, you can hit a white balance button and it takes and adjust. If you point it at something white, it adjusts the relative color and says, okay, now I know what everything should look like, because I know what this white looks like. It adjusts for the color of the light. But
you've got a scale all the way down from candlelight, which is very orange in color, to like, moonlight, which is really, really cool in color, really on the blue end of the scale. So a lot of these lights have a dial on them, like this one, that will, and they call them bicolor, that will go from cool, which is what I have it on now, to warm. So that's tungsten, and that's daylight, and that's pretty common because those are the things you commonly run across. There's another scale that you see sometimes between green and magenta that they'll sometimes call tint. And the reason for that, fluorescent lighting typically fell in between around 4,000 K. And for a lot of years, fluorescent lighting wasn't very usable in photography because it did not produce all of the frequencies of light, and you couldn't get good color rendition out of it. If you looked at a chart of the different frequencies or colors of light, there were holes in it. And so certain colors just couldn't be represented fairly, accurately. And there was a big spike in the green, for instance. So that magenta green adjustment was there to compensate for that. So sometimes you'll see that, even on lighting instruments, you'll see that. And then the other control you'll occasionally get is an RGB, which can make any color under the sun. So if you want to make, a bright purple for whatever, just for as an effect. And they're not as common to have RGB lights, but there are a lot of RGB lights. This is a scene that has a bunch of different color lights in it. And I'm going to toggle over to Lightroom here. You've got light from the sky that's very blue in here. You got light from headlights that's very on the orange end, on the low end of the spectrum. You've got these arc light street lights that are kind of an orange. They don't even put out white light. You get those kind of green lights up on the building. So it's all over the map. With a camera, you can white balance. So you could just say, I want the blue light to be normal, and I want this all to look, just normal. And you can just white balance on the blue. So I can go to the road and say, I'm just going to make the road look normal, and there. Now the road doesn't really look colored, it looks normal. But, it affects everything else too, right? So, and you can do that all day long, but you end up with a kind of a compromise. Whatever you white balance on changes everything else. So you can get some things that look really great and some things that look really weird. And so when you're lighting something, you be aware of the color of the sources that are there already. It's the most typical thing is you go into a situation that already has a bunch of tungsten lights, and your default position oftentimes is that you're going to put your lights on tungsten, so you don't have blue light coming in on one side of their face and tungsten light coming in on the other side of their face. You might want that, but most of the time you don't. But you can use it to effect, but to be aware of it and control it is what you really want. So the next parameter of lighting is direction. Where's the light coming from? In this photo, the source of light is just sunlight. There isn't anything else, I don't think. And it's mostly coming from over there. You can tell by the highlight. But most of what you see is lit by just the ambient, light coming off the clouds and everything. It's flat, even, soft, It's just a very even, soft kind of thing. And the light, the direction, the primary direction is straight on from the direction of the camera. Here you've got light coming primarily from back behind the subject, You've got lights coming from back in the corners, hitting the edges of the glass and stuff, and it's reflecting off, And this is an example of a motivation, which we're not talking about right now, but you get these little highlights that are really pretty so that they don't just look unrealistic, especially with a person's face. You see a highlight and it might just look like, not realistic, but you put something back there like the candles, and your brain kind of says, oh, the candles are making that highlight, which they aren't really. There's a light back there, but that's motivation that motivates the reason why there's a highlight there. But you've got like a bluish light wrapping around here and a yellower light wrapping around there. So there's some orange lights way in the background here, right? So the lights are coming in from different directions to create highlights and reflections. Here you've got light hitting the front of somebody's face, but they're not facing the camera, so it's a side light from the perspective of the camera, and that creates a little more of a contrasty look. And this is a real contrasty look, both in color. So this, you don't have a lot of front light at all here, you know. It's all coming from behind. And you can tell because of the way it's reflecting off. Like you look at his nose, the lights are back coming out toward you. And you've got a lot of shading, you know, up in here. So, and then of course this light is all the way behind him. And when you do that, you know, you get these sharp edges, you know, and that's an interesting look, you know. And then of course, just for effect, we're shooting right into the light and creating a lens flare. And here we got light coming through a window, and that's creating the illusion of sunlight, which you would get in a kitchen, presumably. And then there are other lights, you know, you've got overhead lights, you can see shadows down here. We've got some supplementary lights to light their faces. So there are a variety of sources there. But, you know, hopefully you can see these are creating a little bit different kind of feelings and moods in the shots. And the direction is part of that. Last attribute of light I want to talk about is reflectivity, what the light's hitting. And that makes that's a big part of what you see. So here, for example, you know, we saw some of that with like the wine glasses. You know, it hits the top of this lid and you get a very bright highlight, or it hits the glass here. You know, there are a number of different places where it's like the edges up here, you know, you see it reflecting back off of that. This is called a chip chart, pretty worn one. And this is called a waveform monitor. I think I mentioned that earlier. When you point a camera at a chip chart, the waveform monitor looks like that. It makes this look like little steps, you know, and that's because, you know, you got bright, step down to dark, and then dark, step up to bright. And so when you put that on there, going left to right, you can see it go dark, up to bright, bright, down to dark. And actually, Rex, can you just iris up and down for a minute? If you use the iris to make the whole picture darker and brighter, you can see it goes up and down. But what that shows you is how the brightness of those different little pieces of reflective material, you know, affect the brightness of the picture. So you can have a shot where you're looking out a window, like we were trying to demonstrate earlier, and saying that's way too bright back there. And this happened to me a few weeks ago. You know, we had a shot with somebody standing in front of a window at a hospital, and you just move the camera 10 feet over and angle it, and now you're looking into a bank of trees. Well, the trees are much darker than whatever the building that was in the other part, so they don't reflect so much. And now you've got a good exposure. So, you know, the brightness of the thing that it's reflecting off is pretty important. So this little gizmo is meant to show you kind of extremes. So what you've got is something that's very white, something that's black, something that's middle gray, but then you've got something that's a hole. No light's getting up in there, so it's as black can get. And then you've got something that's like a mirror, and that's reflecting the light right from the light source. So that's as bright can get. And so it just shows you when you put the waveform on that, you know, that little bar at the bottom is the hole. And this little bar at the top is that ring up there, you know. And then you can see the sections that are the white sections and the gray sections and the black sections. You want to iris that up and down. You know, you can just see all that going up. And that top reflective part just stays, you got to go way down before it comes down, you know. You can still see it up there, even when everything else is pretty much black. So, you know, that's something just that you got to be aware of. And when you're lighting things that are reflective, that's a big factor. There's another thing with a lot of reflective materials So, obviously a practical concern here is you put the light in the wrong place and you're going to see the light itself, so you want to be aware of that. But this is a reflective object, and so similar to the little ball on top of that cube, you can position a light so that it hits the shiny parts, and that looks good, it pops out and it's a nice look. But if you position the light the wrong way, it might, glare and not look good. So, you're just aware of the fact that that's a very reflective material. And one thing, if you're lighting something, and we're going to actually do this in a later class, but if you're lighting something that's highly reflective and particularly dark, like the typical thing is like a black car. I actually have a black coffee maker I'm going to use to demonstrate this. But it's like you're shooting into a mirror, and you're really not lighting the object because you can't see the object. You're lighting whatever it's reflecting. So what you do is you put up giant, usually white, solid things, and you light them. And you put them in such a place that you see them in the reflection of the object. And that's happening here to a limited extent. What you see here is something back here reflecting. And it's not a hard light because you'd see a harsh reflection. It's a soft light. But it's less evident in this type of an object because it's kind of a brushed steel. But if you had a really, really reflective object, you'd see that a lot. But the glass is reflective, so there's a lot of things going on there. And this is another thing happening here is controlling the light. This is on a piece of glass, so we're not letting light spill all over the place. You got a little bit of this background here, but not very much. So, it's just, using flags and things to control the light. And then the last attribute of light that I want to talk about is and this is a great one, is the broadness or diffusion of the light, which can go from a point source, to a very broad source. So an example of a point source is the sun on a cloudless day. And if you look at, put a stick in the ground on a cloudless day, you will see a really hard, sharp, dark shadow, and that's a hard light. And if you go on a completely overcast day, you won't see any shadow. The light is spread out. That's the softest kind of a light, so this is a very soft light, it just kind of wraps around, and there's some shadow, but it's really soft, and it's very gradual, it goes from light to shadow in a very gradual way, and that's a much harder light. You get this very defined, sharp shadow, so you've got a hard light in that guy, and those really create really different feelings, the like film noir traditional stuff is hard lights, and lots of shadows, and it's dark and foreboding feeling, So there are many ways, and this is one that we're going to spend some time on this later, is looking at different ways to affect how hard and soft lights are, and how hard or soft you want it to be, how you can change it, how you can move it around, because you can really finesse that to great effect. And it's something that you really, can do a lot with. So this is this isn't quite as soft as the first picture, but it is still pretty soft. It's going to wrap it around. That's very soft on him. It's very soft. And they're back to the hard light again. And here you've got, for the most part, pretty hard light. There's a little bit of soft light coming in from the front, but it's a pretty hard light. That guy again, that's, pretty hard light hitting him for the most part.
If you like what you see, like and follow us on our social media channels. And everything is downloadable for free on our website, ruchiproductions.com.